Okay. So just in terms of supply and demand, I think everyone pretty much understands the basic concepts of supply and demand, like where people want to buy and where people want to sell, that sort of thing. I'm really just try to focus on how you identify supply and demand and how you would mark it on your chart. So this is a bar chart I use. This is what I normally use for trading on toss. Everyone's going to be familiar with candles, so I'll just switch to that. Um, Mainly for supply and demand, what I'm focused on is areas of time and areas of volume. So I have the volume down here, and then I focus on where has the most time been spent and where has it been the most like coiled per se. So right here I have a chart of some random future, the S&P 500 future, and so just for demand, I'm looking for areas where you're holding supports, that sort of thing. The reason I use demand in supply areas over support and resistances is because a lot of times what ends up happening is I noticed this early on was I would start drawing like just tons of support areas and resistance areas just all over the place. And at some point, when you have 100 and like 50 to 100, resistance lines everywhere, this is not that useful, right? Especially when you have them all really coiled together, like really coalescing and stuff. That's not super useful, and it sometimes it's just a lot of noise that you don't want to really deal with. So that's where I started drawing supply and resistance, supply and demand areas. So for supply, I'm just looking for big areas where I spend a lot of time. So I might try to find a good one. Like, try to find it. So here, ES spent a lot of time just kind of hanging around this area after, it's been in this uptrend kind of thing. It's been slowly moving up and down. But then this day, this was Friday session, it kind of just took a bit of a breather here. So it spent time just sitting in the same 2-3 point range. So if I can mark that properly, I just draw that out as far as I can. I don't try to go too far. And then for supply, I look for just areas where it's been really wicked down. Less so than I look for areas where it's been a lot of accumulation. I look for areas that have just been like, hey, they smacked it down pretty quickly, because those areas tend to be pretty I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Consistent. Areas tend to be pretty consistent. So I just take my chart, just draw a bunch of rectangles. Again, with this demand, it's another good square. And you can see on the chart, like when I draw these out, you can see where they sort of react. Here this was a bit of a supply, and then it reacted same area a little bit higher. I drew this wrong because it should have originally been just this, and then this would be later. So that's the basics. It's not a whole lot. You just kind of draw them. Eventually, there's no one exact right way to draw them besides just focusing on those areas. And if you want to get better at it, just keep drawing them and keep them on your chart after a while and see how accurate they were, or how how the price traded around those areas. I like to sometimes mark my supply areas. Not anymore. I used to mark them differently, now I think about it. But eventually, with ES, it just became more of a, or like any stock, became more of a hassle when these things start coming through these areas, and then I have to go back and change them all. So I just usually would keep them the same color. And then now, yeah, and that's about it on just drawing them. I don't really think you have to do that much. I like to keep it simple. There's no need to overcomplicate it. Like, you don't need to be like, oh, you know, I need to have it this specific way, and it needs to be this wide, it needs to be this big. Like, supply, demand areas, it's just draw them as simple as you can, and don't overcomplicate your process. And now for identifying how to use them, really, I know someone asked me in a DM earlier today, like, hey, I drew out the demand area, and, you know, it just flushed right through it. What am I supposed to do? Or, like, you know, the trade didn't go the way I thought. It just flushed right through the demand area. And really all it is less so than worrying about, hey, there's a demand area, it's gonna bounce here. You want to be watching if it bounces there, or if it reacts strongly. So here a good example is in this demand area, right? You saw it start to sell off a bit here, and you had this previous demand area drawn out. And you just see it, you know, every time it comes down into this, it just pops up. Here, pops up, and then eventually it starts going again. And now, how I would take this trade is I would probably wait to see these first couple reactions, then try to go long. And ideally, I would just stop out underneath this demand area, right? Like, I would scale in a bit here, maybe try to scale in at the very end, and then stop out underneath. And so at this point, once it fully, you know, I might try here I'd be like, oh, it's confirmed, but then it gets knocked back down. But, you know, that's all I'm looking at. I'm not, you know, I know people use indicators and stuff. I stopped using indicators mainly just because it was a me thing. Like, I would only use them if I wanted them to be right. Like, I wanted them to confirm my trade, and if they didn't, I'd just be like, oh yeah, the indicator's wrong. Why am I using an indicator? And so then I was like, okay, I should just stop using an indicator because it's just becoming confirmation bias for that. Let's see, what else? For supply, it's the same thing as demand. You're watching that reaction upwards, and, you know, if any of these, if they break through, this doesn't have a good one where it breaks through the demand, unless it's here. This one would be okay. I'll just drop this is the one, this blue one I want to look at here. You know, you had this point. These were weird days. You're not going to see these candles a whole lot on a lot of stocks consistently, just because these are weird indices moves, like after hours and stuff. I don't know, it's like gamma stuff. I don't want to get into that. But you're here and you're watching it flush through. This is kind of why you don't take it necessarily in the demand area all the time. Like, you kind of want to see it get out of there, because here you can be like, oh, it's wicking really nicely, like boom, rejection, but it's never left that demand area, and it's never held above. So those are kind of important things you want to look for. You want to look for, one, you want to see it whatever direction of the trade you're looking for, you want to see it reject the supply demand area. You want to see it hold over after rejecting, because that's important. And obviously, yeah, you don't want it to flush through in the wrong direction. And if it flushes through, you just stop out, like cut the trade. You know, I think that's the most important part. People are like, what should I do if it flushes through? Well, you should cut the trade. You know, like, if it's not going the way it's in your plan, you shouldn't still hold the trade. Hopium is a hell of a drug, and it's usually wrong. I don't really have much else in terms of supply and demand. Like, I feel like we've gone over a lot before, like with ACE. I know had his whole Twitter thread and stuff. Are there any, like, does anyone have any questions with supply and demand? That's more of what I wanted to get into. That's a lot easier for me to talk about. I got a notification on the floor. Do you only do it, or do you do it in also do downtrend? Are you asking if I draw them in only an uptrend or only in a downtrend? Oh, okay, yeah. So no, I just draw them regardless of trend or no trend. Like I draw them on the chart anyway. If I'm looking to take, okay, yeah. I can see if I can find. Let me see if something is in a downtrend here. I can draw that. I know a good one. Yeah, Tesla. Oh god, those wicks are horrific. I'm gonna ignore those. Yeah, so I mean, I would draw, and I can draw it, because Tesla, I'll focus on the downtrend here. You know, Tesla had some time, you know, it's spent here. The dailies are a little bit harder, but I don't have a better example. I guess here's clearly. I would draw it. This is another area where they kind of chilled out. So you would just draw them the same, pretty much. Prices chill all day. Examples. Yeah, so Zeus, you draw supply and demand regardless of trend, even if there's no trend. Like just draw them. You know, that those are, it's useful for your trade. I don't think it's not a, like, only if it's in an uptrend does supply and demand matter. It's effective either way. 30 minute, okay. And then the next was, so you see big obvious supply zone like Neo today. The prices chill there all day. Does that mean they're hanging out or eating up that supply? It's not like they touched it and it went down instantly. Okay. You know, it's I can't say for sure with Neo because I haven't fully looked at him, but it's, I would say when from personal experience, something hugging on a supply and demand area, like not exactly like this is a lot better in terms because it's come down a bit. When it's like, if you see a bunch of candles like they're just sitting and they haven't really rejected, like they're just hugging and they haven't come down at all in a different direction, that's usually a good sign for another move up. This just ends up being a bear or a bull flag, right? What you don't want to see is a bunch of these, right? You don't want to see like boom, boom, and then like another move down, right? Like this is held up fairly well inside this original move up, and then, you know, this is a supply. I'm sure if I had a daily on, I would have found it. I hope that answers the question. Okay, Cecil asked, is supply and demand related to what James calls reactionary candles, reactionary area candles? Yes. Yeah, it would be. It's the same concepts, you know, where you're looking for reactions, right? That's the essence of supply and demand. Like, hey, you have this area that's previously had high demand or high supply. There, you know, that's where you've seen the reaction. That would be the same. Like, is it reacting again here? Do people still want it here? Do people still want to sell here? How do you confirm that bids are being chipped away within a zone, or what are you looking for within that supply demand area? I guess I've already said, I'm just looking for that reaction. I'm just looking for, I keep it pretty simple. I'm just looking for, you know, the equity or the future I'm in to just react strongly to that area I drew. Like, I'm not looking for, in terms of time and sales, like level 2, that sort of stuff, I'm looking for With time and sales, I'm looking for it to speed up in the direction I want. Like when it reacts to that, I want to see the time and sales speed up. I want to see the bids move. I don't really want to see it react and it just be like shut off. Like if the tape still moves, that's what I want to see. Are you using daily and 1 hour for supply and demand? I use daily and I use 30 minutes, depending on what time frame I'm trading. So regardless, I mark daily, and then if I'm doing an intraday trade, I will mark 30 minutes as well, and then I will leave a note to myself on if they're separated. How is this different from drawing support and resistance lines? I mean, you're just giving yourself a range, more or less. Especially when you're dealing with stuff like stocks, it's not as easy to, especially with bigger stocks, large caps, it's not as easy to mark like, hey, to this cent, this is going to be the support, because there's so many factors, like so many players moving around trying to get a piece of the stock or something. Trying to just pinpoint a level and then being like, I'm going to stop out under, stop out over, kind of doesn't give yourself a whole lot of breathing room, while demand is more what's actually happening. I think when you're dealing with stocks that are like under, I don't know, 5, I want to say under 10, but I'd be like under 5, it's probably a lot easier, because especially if they're illiquid, it's probably a lot easier. But it's also going to come down to like what you're comfortable with. That's the other thing. Like some people just may not like supply and demand, may not like, you like support and resistance, and I say go for it. I like supply and demand mainly because it's what works for me when I trade really well, and I don't have as much noise on my chart, and I'm not worried about as many like if I have to draw 50 support resistances, either I'm drawing too many or it's just there's too much noise, and I'd rather not have to worry about that. What was that? So that was Roki. No, wait, that was Nick. How do you get a sense of for when supply and demand is drying up, like when it's about to give way to a push higher, push lower? Earlier when I was talking about it hugging on a price, trying to think. Let me pull up that Neo chart again, see if oh, whatever. I want to just say volume is important, just watching the tape. If you watch, for example, if I have the tape in level 2 pulled up, and when ES came down into this supply area, and I'm watching the tape, and when it comes into this, I want to see the tape speed up. Like, I don't care completely about the volume and stuff if I'm seeing a lot of transactions, but I care more about the speed that I'm watching, or the level 2 also. Like, you start seeing it move a lot. You want to just see speed underneath, like on the surface. That's all. That's really all it is. And when it's about to give way or push lower, that obviously it's a little, we deal with 21 knives all the time. That's a little harder. I know today on CU, what was it? What was that runner day? CUEN? Okay, yeah. So this, if I go to the 1 minute, I was trying to trade this today. I ended up with like a scratch loss because I actually got out before this candle. So I'd been watching, so when I pulled this up today, it was like here. and I was just watching. This isn't even that good. This is like, supply area is like just this whole area up here. So this had hit, I guess this had hit all-time highs today or something, and I was noticing like the kill candle was coming, was lowering a lot. But just looking at the chart, I'd seen it. It's making lower highs or higher lows. I was like, okay, it's worth something. I took a long here-ish somewhere. I just had seen this. I was like, okay, I'll grab it here, and I was hoping, it would go up above 9. That's kind of where my target was. But I was watching the tape and watching the reaction here, right? So this was this area here was a smaller demand zone, and I wanted to or supply zone, and I wanted to see, as it's trading up into this, I wanted to see it break through and then hold. And when it came up, it just it made a little mini rejection, and I was like, okay. And I really didn't like that because the tape was kind of struggling, and when it hit here, it started speeding up. I was like, okay, I don't really like that rejection, and I kind of just got out while it was drifting here. And when I checked back, it had broken through and then knifed, which is the dirtiest way of kill candling. That sucks. I hope no one took a big loss on that. Let me make sure I fully answer that. Where was that? That was GUP. Like when it's about to give away. Yeah, that's just an example of how I feel like I just saw, here's the major supply area of the day. This is another big one. This is so hard because the whole thing is fucking supply. But here, you're trying to watch, especially first. I'm playing this. I'm looking for a quick scalp. I'm looking for a quick scalp. I want to see, at least within the past 30 minutes, what has been the rejection, what has been the area it struggled, and can it break into that easily, or can it hold over that easily? I did neither of those things. I was like, I'm gonna get out. It could rip up higher, but from what I'm used to seeing and the way I'm thinking through it, I don't want to be in that trade at this moment. I could be wrong, but that's something you just got to deal with. If you're wrong, then you just okay, now I know. Okay, are you using daily and demand, looking for volume to confirm breakout for higher lows? Are you using daily and demand? Are you using daily demand and looking for volume to confirm breakout for higher lows? Yes, I guess. I would say yes. I do use daily demand zones, and and volume. You want good volume that's the whole concept of the tape speeding up, the level 2 speed. You want good volume, and you want that volume to continue as it's making the move through or rejecting that area. You want the volume to confirm the price. What else? Let's see. VINs. Are you setting limit orders to scale in different parts of your demand zone, like 25, 25, 50? Yeah, pretty much. 25, 25, 50 is the way. I usually just do... I usually don't do the 50% part. I usually just do 50 and 50 because by the time it gets to the third one, I'm not really interested anymore. And usually I just like to add it also depends on what I'm trading. I think on if I'm swinging, I'll do 25, 25, 50. If it's intraday, I will do one extra ad, and then I'm not interested anymore. Are demand zones created by toots? Yes and no. So, the big players in the market are going to be institutions, algorithms. I won't say algorithms because they work for either, but institutions, market makers, and then the smaller one is retail. Retail has negligible effect on the overall direction of the market. I don't care whatever Wall Street Bet says or whatever, none of those GameStop AMC things happened without some institutional player coming along and being like, yeah, we will run it up in their direction that they want. So yeah, all these demand supplies areas are big players, market makers, institutions trying to find liquidity. Algorithms just, that's all it is. All this supply and demand is just a search for liquidity. Like, where can I unload? Where can I buy back in? Where can I move this? I believe this is not to criticize the trade. Right, Blue Bowler gets it. It's not, you're not trying to necessarily say like, oh, if I've drawn it like this is where it has to. You're trying to see, is this where they react? Is this where it actually is? Can you review a large cap example? Yeah. Let's see. What's one that's moved a lot? I know we're talking about Airbnb today. Fawthorns, you want... Let's see. And you also had a question about speed. When you indicate what you want, it comes with demands on speed. You have two questions. I'll just say, Tuck, you said how wide? Just as wide as it gives me. Like, sometimes the time it spends accumulating in one area is really small. And sometimes, like this, the area is pretty wide, just, where it's spending the time. This is one area. We're rejecting it. This is another. And then here. Here-ish. So I'm kind of just drawing where... I won't draw it there. Then maybe here is another good... I'll draw this one small. Large cap. This all today. 1 minute. This is like on 30 minutes. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm just drawing on 1 minute because I can give you a better example. Normally I draw on 30 minutes and stuff, but this is a lot easier for me to just show you how you would draw it because there's a lot more candles. 1 sec. I'm going to answer your questions. Okay, so you said large cap example, and yeah, so I mean, demand and supply is not, the concepts aren't going to change as much from large cap to small cap per se, unless I mean we're talking about like a pump and dump like on Twitter or something. That's where I guess that'd be important. But that will, those, where someone pumps it and where someone dumps it aren't going to be incredibly accurate supply and demand areas. So that's kind of the importance of like daily levels. So if I go on the daily for Airbnb and I'm like, okay, like down here, I want to see if I can get a wider. Oh, I forgot. So here would be one, just in this area. It's technically one demand area, but you could just, this is the other thing. Like a lot of times it's subjective to what you think. Right. This would be like a very simple way of drawing it. If I'm looking to swing Airbnb for a longer period of time, if I'm just doing an intraday trade on this and I see like, hey, this demand area is really wide and it doesn't really help me on intraday trade. Okay, so what do I do next? I go and I pull up, someone said earlier, 1 hour chart. You could do 1 hour, you could do 30 minutes, do 1 hour because I can get it to go longer. See, now you have a lot more wicking. You can be like, okay, where are they spending a lot of time? There's this, actually goes here is one. And there's all, this is pretty obviously where there's some demand. God, there's so much wicking. This is so much, okay, I'm going to remove that. I like drawing it like this. This is a lot easier for me. Okay. And then here is pretty obvious. Supply and demand. So these are like 3 major areas I'm looking for. Obviously you have all this noise in here, but you're like, okay, Airbnb's down here, and hey, it came out of the demand area, but it came right back in fairly easily on the 1 hour. And it has, I guess, as this, and it came out, and now it's holding. You know, you could take the long, and I guess you could say like, hey, I might want to scale out because there's been some reaction here in terms of like breakdown. So you scale out and wait for it to confirm going over. That's about it for large cap. It's not too different. What's the next question? The further way out your demand is drawn out, does it become less valid? The closer, be more accurate. Tokoloshi, yes. I would say the more a zone has been retested over and over, probably the less likely I am to think, hey, it's going to keep working, because that means, at some point the demand's going to dry up for that area. It just depends. Like, I don't think after once or 3 times, demand area is going to disappear, but I think, after 10, 20 times of trying something, at some point, demand's going to be exhausted. What? I already answered Tux, said how wide. I guess I accidentally skipped Tokoloshi. How wide did you draw it? Yeah, Tuck, I just draw it as wide as it gives me. Speed is just, how fast the tape's moving, how fast the candle moves out of that area, and if it holds, right? That's the key. Like, if it moves out of there, you just have to be watching that quickly. Like, I can't show you speed on a static chart, but when you're watching the tape and you see, or you're watching the chart and you see like the candle or the bar just bounce right out or something, or reject really fast, and it holds after the rejection, that's the kind of speed and the volume I'm looking for. What does supply become demand zone? Yes, supply can become demand. It's the same concept as supply, or support becoming resistance, and resistance becoming support. When using daily time frame draw zone, doesn't the range of the zone get pretty wide? How to deal with wide zone? Okay, yeah, I think I also mentioned that. I did mention it with Father, I think, but I'll go back over it. If it's too wide, I'll narrow in on my time frame and see where I can get better. I might do, if I'm still swinging, I might just still do 4 1 hour and just do a full like year-long chart and see the most recent and more relevant areas. I don't like to necessarily draw demand and supply zones for areas that are not close by to where I'm trading in the moment. So I know I drew Tesla earlier, or I don't know if very bad short-term memory, but when I'm drawing Tesla, if it starts going up, I drew the areas here. I should have extended them, but like this is for right now. I could draw this later, but it's at 670. Like, maybe once it gets up to 800, then I'll start drawing more areas. Don't the range get pretty wide? That's about it. Like, if it's too wide for your trade, that's when you want to narrow in on like a 31 hour time frame and see. Because a lot of times if you don't look into those, you don't get the full picture of why a move happened. Because there's been a couple times, especially on stocks that have moved a lot, where you'll see, oh, there was a lot of volume on this day, and it was red all day. But if you zoom in, it's like it was a pretty low volume day, except for this one random green spike in the day, right? So you sometimes want to look in to those days and to the volume. Do you buy and sell within the zone if I'm using... Yeah. I will just buy. If I'm going, if I'm going long or short, like if I'm starting up a position, I will look to set it up in one of those zones. Exiting ends up being more scaling out. Yes, I'll use those zones as like, an area, the zones to scale. I'll use those zones to scale out. If it's an intraday trade, I just end up watching like the action. If it's a swing, I use these zones. Like I just watch this and I just see where it goes. But for an intraday trade, I use the zones to enter the trade, and then I watch the tape and I watch the level 2 around those areas, because I sometimes might exit before it hits a demand zone or a supply zone when I think it's, it doesn't have enough volume, doesn't have enough speed to get there. What else? Wish you love and hate people. That's not it. Stream is full. Dang, we got 48 people. Were there any more questions? If there's not, I will show you kind of some other things I use for supply and demand, sort of. Oh, question.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So in your examples, you were drawing the supply based off a sideways action, right? And then the demand was based off of a sideways action, and then the supply, you were kind of basing those lines off of the tips, right? So when it exits that, if it pushes through that supply area, let's say it's at the top of a chart, and then it goes back to retrace into that zone, basically it's retracing back into the tips, right? As opposed to retracing back into a sideways action. Is that something you ever think about, or does that just seem to work out for you pretty well when you're drawing that top zone like that in the support area?
This is, that's what it ends up being. Like, this is just what has worked for me. I think you could draw it the other way as well, and it would probably work just as fine. It's just the way I like to draw it, and it's the way it works for me. But you can draw them, I don't want to say like you can draw them any way you want to, but there's slight variations to the way you can draw supply and demand zones, and you'll be correct anyway, just because you're giving yourself a little bit of a range.
Sure, okay, that makes sense, yeah.
There's no exact hard way to do it, it's just, the general concept of like, where do you think, the reaction has been. That's basically all it is. Let's see. Oh, is JJ as chill as he sounds? Dude, listen, VWAP trader JJ, he's I've watched him trade on Zoom before, and I'm not gonna fanboy or anything, but it's pretty cool just because he's super calm the whole time. You listen to him and he just no emotion change. He will lose a trade and he'll be completely fine. He'll win a trade, be fine. He's great at explaining a lot of those concepts. That's about it. Can you look at
what's his Twitter name?
VWAP trader, JJ, VWAP trader. Can you look into Suen? Yeah, I can look into it. We covered it a second ago, I think, but Suen is kind of hard because it was hitting into all-time highs, so it's just making new supply all day. Was there anything in specific blue bowler that you wanted me to look at on it, other than I tried drawing it earlier and I was just kind of the supply on here was all, honestly the more accurate way of drawing it would have just been this is where it was here, and then it's transitioned to here. And then this would have been, I guess, demand, and it flushed out. You can see kind of where this works, but this type of thing, I don't know. This is why you kind of want to use. This is the other problem I had with it, was I was there's nothing up here that I can be yeah, there's demand supply. This is uncharted territory. So that's going to be something you want to think about as well. When you're trading something, is there actual, has it been traded? Can we get VWAP JJ info to check him out? Yeah, I've linked some videos. Let me go see if they're right there. If you go look in educational materials, I will put a quick educational materials. If you look in educational materials, I posted 3 videos. He has a podcast called Confessions of a Market Maker. I put the 3 episodes that I thought are really useful for people who are new traders, especially. He's, he has a lot of good insights, and more importantly, he gives you an idea of what's going on behind the scenes and an order flow. Like who's putting in the orders, how are they managing your orders, that sort of thing. Going back to call and put contracts, was a good strategy to use days out when swinging or intraday? Intraday, you can just stick with weeklies if you're just trading intraday. If you're trying to swing, it just kind of depends on when you think a move happens. I really don't like to swing any options contract that's less than 2 weeks out. I like to give myself plenty of time, because even if I'm right by a week, the theta starts to kick in, and I don't really like that. Yeah, so his Twitter is VWAP Trader, and then also the videos I post education. On your first,
his actual Twitter is VWAP Trader 1.
Yeah, that's right. On your first example, when a stock traded sideways to confirm a demand zone, at least how many candles should we look for as confirmation? There's no number. I would say multiple. Like if it's just 1 candle, 2 candles, it's not as strong. But if you're seeing, let's say, my example was the 30-minute time frame, and I saw 5 or 6, and at that point, that's a couple of hours, several hours. That's gonna be, you can say comfortably like, hey, someone wants it here, or there's a lot of activity, a lot of trading going on here. Yeah, I would just recommend 30 minutes daily for supply zones. A lot of times these momentum movers, when they're hitting all-time highs, supply and demand becomes a little bit more tricky, because the supply and demand is being made in the moment, like off the top. It's quick. Could you say a stock is consolidating when it's in demand zone before it comes out of it? Not sure if that. Yeah, no, that's how I was drawing mine, was based off consolidation. You could do, I know Fothler mentioned earlier, you could draw it by the reactionary wicking for demand as well. I just like drawing it on the consolidation because that's just how it works out for me. But yeah, that would be consolidating. You're just looking for it to go in either direction, right, to take the trade, the way I draw it. If you draw just on the reactionary for demand and the reactionary for supply, then you're going to want to focus on the reactions to that. If you draw it on where it consolidates, you're going to want to trade where it moves out of those zones only. I don't want to say only, because people can trade any way they want. Who buys 1 million shares after hours? Oh, I see. A lot of times those orders, it could be someone front loading. It's only 1 million. That's what I say. I don't know, if you see a big order like that on like a large cap or something, usually what happens are institutions can't market buy an order or something on the, they can't just slap 1 million shares of like Tesla, because it'll, really affect the price. So they have their dark pools that they can enter in slowly, and at the end of the day, the transaction will get transferred over to them, and it'll show up on the tape at that point after hours. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to show you guys some of the other stuff I use. So this is market profile, volume profile. It's just a cool way of looking at time and volume in a market in a more distribution. So right now I have the SP 500. I would love to right now, but I'm not going to pull up any other stocks on here, because this like market profile thing sometimes gets really laggy, and I don't want to have to sit here for like 10 minutes trying to get something to load. Am I using a scanner of any kind? Not, I mean, I go on FinViz and I just put some stuff in that I'm looking for. If it's, momentum, top 10 stocks of the day, percentage. I know I think James, from Momentum Room, they have, like the Tink scanner. That one's pretty good. But other than that, I'm not really using like a specific scanner to find my trades every day. Like I just kind of, I look around, I spend some time just going through everything and seeing if there's anything I like. Anyway, for the volume profile, market profile, this is another way of looking for supply demand. On one side, on this left side of a profile, I have the volume. So this is the volume per price. And on the right side is the time spent, the distribution of where the time was spent per period. So this side is just total volume per price. On this side, it's just split up into the 30-minute. So each of these, I don't know if you can see them if I zoom in. You can kind of see that there's little numbers here. Each of those means that it was traded at least, it only marks it once per 30-minute time frame in a day. But it'll mark like, hey, it spent time. So you just want to look, hey, it spent a lot of time trading at this price, but was there a lot of volume? Was the volume there to confirm it, or where did the volume spend a lot of time? That's just another way. I don't have a specific way of drawing supply and demand with these. I just end up looking at the profile face value, and I'm like, okay, this is where in the past there was a lot of accumulation. Like, I don't even mark it. I just look back and do it, because this already shows you where the supply, where the demand is kind of being. You can mark it out with a line. These little yellow and green lines represent the most volume and the most time, like, period. So these lines end up becoming important if you use the profile. If you don't use the profile, like, you don't need them. I don't think there's so many ways to trade. Like, if you don't use it, it's not gonna be like, oh my god, I didn't have the volume point of control, I couldn't make this trade. You'll be fine without it. It's one of those things where, like, if you learn to understand it, then it's useful. If you don't know how to use it, don't use it until you know how to use it. And then the other thing is, I wanted to show you a cooler chart. With futures, I can pull it up on Sierra chart, but it'd be too lazy. I can pull up, this is called a footprint chart. This is a rougher version of a footprint chart, not a good one. Not as good one as you would get with a broker like Sierra chart. Market Delta, I think, is the other one, TQG. But this basically shows you, like, I have this on 30 minutes. This shows me all the volume on the bid side, all the volume on the ask side traded in a day, versus the volume profile, where I get to see total volume and total time on one side. I see total volume. This splits it up to me specifically bid and ask volume. Where was the most volume traded on the bid? Where was it traded on the ask? There's different things you can imply from, like, hey, this is where the sellers are being, like, they're selling to the bid hard, but this is where the bid is being, like, a lot of volume's coming to the bid, they're being absorbed, that sort of thing. Those are just two cool things I wanted to show, just as maybe more background concepts into, like, how supply and demand works. Like, there's another level of looking at it if you were really interested. That's more of like a why it works. You don't really need these to make it work. There's plenty of people who don't trade using these and make a lot of money, but this kind of gives you, like, a more mechanical, structural aspect. Like, oh, that's why this works, right? Like, this is where they were coming in, like this area, like these areas. They're, like, absorbing it all down here, and then they start taking it up after that kind of thing. Close that. Any more questions? There's yeah, that blend chart looks pretty good. I think you've nailed it pretty well. And yeah, I like you have support and resistance drawn on there. I do that sometimes, if I see a more reactionary area that I'm like, either it's too wide or it's so small, I'll just draw the support and resistance. Like I sometimes have both. Look at Wish. Oh, it's down more. It was 13. Yeah, it doesn't look pretty. Roki, are you just wanting supply and demand, or you just want to know my thoughts on it? I can give either. I mean, I can tell you just from a naked chart perspective right now, I personally am kind of waiting on it to either pick more of a direction or at least accumulate here before making a choice. You can see down here it accumulated, well, specifically right here was a lot of accumulation, and they tried to fake people out with that. Before that, down here is another demand zone, a lot of accumulation. I should probably be drawing these less as accumulation and more like this. This is more demand, this is demand, and then this right here is supply.
You redrew that middle zone right there. Can you tell us why you did that?
Yeah, so while I was talking, I was drawing it, and I realized I was kind of, you mentioned earlier I drew it more like accumulation, and I realized, thinking about it, like this be more accurate as a demand zone if I was on the lower side of that, where they're actually reacting. This is fine to draw it when it's like flattened like this, but when it's chopping up and down, there's no reason to be like, yeah, this is all, you know, like this could be supply right here. Like this would be the demand. This would be...
So wouldn't it be on those two, they almost look like dojis to me right there in the middle, right?
Yeah. Which one's this one?
Right below it, right in between those two zones you got right there. See that little sideways movement with those two dojis?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that, right?
No. Those are like, I don't know. This is also a daily chart. I'm sure if you put it on like the 30-minute, you would probably start seeing more like, yeah. I think these are the ones, these end up being the 30-minute ones, or daily ones we were looking at, and yeah, you see like the wicking here. So you could draw demand and supply down here on them, if that makes sense. I draw them a little bit differently on intraday time frames versus like a daily time frame is my issue, and sometimes the chart too. So I don't know. It ends up being more like a subjective thing, and like, hey, this is what I think is. But yeah, those two, just on the candles, I wouldn't say those would be. You're looking for more like bigger wicks or more reactionary stuff. These are more like indecision, like it hasn't fully left where it opened or something. Yeah, glad you enjoyed it, Zeus. Roki, I hope that showed you, I guess, anything with Wish. I mean, I don't have that much of an opinion on the direction. We'll just see as it goes. I wanted to get it when it was like 10s, and then I forgot about it, didn't get it. So I'm kind of just chilling out. I'm not going to FOMO into it. Are there any more questions, comments, criticism? I know criticism is a hard thing for a lot of people, especially Furus. But yeah, I guess if that's all the questions, I hope I answered people's questions the best I could. I hope people learned a lot, learned something, have a takeaway, and that's about it for me. I'll stop. And that's about it for me. I'll stop sharing my screen.